Hi, I'm Alison, and I'm here to chat to Alex Foster, author of Circular Motion, our latest read for the New Scientist Book Club, and one of my favourite books of the year so far. It's set in the near future, where huge aircraft continuously orbiting the Earth are causing the rotation of the planet to speed up bit by bit. But just a spoiler warning before we kick off, Alex and I are going to be discussing all sorts of details from the book, so do be aware of that if you haven't read it yet. Anyway, Alex, welcome to New Scientist Book Club.
Thank you for having me. Excited to talk about the book.
Excellent. Can we start off by just having you give us a brief description of the novel and what you were setting out to do with it?
Yeah, so the book takes place on a planet that starts to spin faster and faster and faster. So at the start of the book, days are noticed to be just a couple of seconds fast. So they're 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds maybe. And by the end of the book, the sun is rising and setting basically every hour. And the book follows a couple of main characters, Tanner and Winnie, as they deal with the political, the ecological, and the sort of sociological, existential fallout of this global change.
So where did it all begin from? Where did you start with the kind of the seed of the book?
I've worked on the book for many years, so a lot of parts of the book come from different things, different experiences, different ideas. At first, I just thought that the experience of a planet spinning faster and faster and faster had some sort of excitement for me, and I didn't even have an explicit articulation for why. It touched some kind of anxiety in me, I sensed. Later, I came to realize the obvious interpretation, which is that it is a book about people's ways of coping with their feeling that the world is spinning out of control. But like any good allegory, there is not just one sort of isomorphic one-to-one way of mapping what's happening in the book onto what is happening in our world. There is a very strong climate change theme throughout the book, that as the planet spins faster, there's this corporate denialism, there are storms, and you can interpret the book that way, but I think the book is open to a lot of different interpretations. There's also this phenomenon that as people are moving faster throughout their days get shorter, and that captured for me a lot of the sense of modern life. There's these advertisements that are built as a way of supposedly correcting the problem, but actually make the problem worse. And what it really comes down to for me is that the experience of being in this world of the book, I hope, captures some of the feeling, the anxiety, the stress, and also the promise and hope that you, the reader, might feel as I feel living in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. But once you've got this world that is spinning faster and faster, this idea for this, how do you work out or how did you work out the physics of it all? And did you kind of chat with experts to see what they thought might happen? How did you bring all of that together?
I am lucky to know some people who study physics, and so I've been close with them as I've been studying literature. So I have plenty of people to talk to. I also have a background in math. I studied economics and worked in economics research. So that was enough for me to do the sort of rudimentary stuff that a novelist is required to do, to calculate, for example, as the days are 7 hours in a certain chapter, how much will that affect gravity and in what ways at various cities in the world. But I had to make creative editorial decisions too about what sort of effects of the planet spinning faster do I want to include, and that came down to what felt resonant to me. So certain things like people's schedules getting messed up really felt resonant to me in a world where I feel like I'm constantly hurried, and I don't have enough time in my day to accomplish everything that I want to do, and especially to accomplish the things that feel most meaningful to me above the noise of everything that's urgent. And when the planet starts spinning faster in the book, you get these really weird effects like gravity feeling as if it's tilted in various points. And that off-kilter feeling seemed to me to resonate with, this sort of sense that people have that their lives are off-kilter. And to make that a literal experience in the book, I hope is sort of resonant. So when you come out of the book, you see your own world differently.
Yeah, no, definitely that's true. But so listen, I mean, the airships are pretty cool. I quite like the idea of being able to do a world crawl or whatever. That sounds really great. But obviously they have this detrimental effect as well. Steve, one of the members of the club, asks, why couldn't they just set up an additional circuit that goes in the opposite direction to counter the effect? Or is that too annoying a question?
No, no. So they talk about that in the book. And there's this essentially this whole industrial momentum behind the circuit, which causes the planet to spin faster, and it wouldn't be nearly as problematic if all the ships didn't go west, which is what they do. And they
Yeah.
continue to all go west because this corporate momentum is behind it. And there's a lot of discussion throughout the book of corporations not wanting to look like they're backtracking or they're admitting some mistake. And so they
Mm.
continually double down on what they do. I also liked the idea of this sort of visual of everyone moving in the same direction, which felt to me like, sort of a symbol for the way that we live in a society that continually causes problems, ecological problems, problems of resource distribution, and yet we have a really hard time moving in the opposite direction from everyone else ideologically or professionally.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking about sort of parallels with the world today in your book, I guess another one is that the world is spinning ever faster in your book as a result of technology. So people create a new technology in order to solve this problem, which is
Mhm.
truly horrific idea of covering the sky with the shell. So talk to us a bit about that because I found it so disturbing, the idea of the sky slowly being covered over and then the adverts that start appearing wherever you are. I thought that was pleasantly horrific.
Yeah, so they build this shell around the world to try to control the climate in every sense as the climate is deteriorating. And basically, they've tried to master the entire world, which they only need to do because the world is so inhospitable because of the things that they've previously done in the book. Um, they end up funding the shell naturally by broadcasting advertisements in the sky. And so they've replaced the sky, which is, this sort of what I think of as a sort of unconquerable aspect of nature that is infinite. Um, and they've made it finite and made it into advertisements. Um, there are a lot of books out there that talk about the corrosive effects of advertising and consumerist culture. One thing I was particularly interested in is not just the effect that the advertisements have on us seeing ads put up, everywhere. I live in New York City. Anywhere that you walk, you'll see these posts of like public service posts that are full that broadcast advertisements. And these are slowly replacing things like trees.
Hmm.
And one thing I was particularly interested in is not just the effect that those have on you seeing them, but also all of the labor and resources that go into constructing them. So throughout the book, for more of the book, they are constructing the shell than the amount of the book in which the shell is actually complete. And there's this irony to it when there are so many problems in the world that we could fix, and we are devoting so much labor and in fact, exhausting ourselves to build things like a giant screen to show advertisements.
There's some great bits in the book where you have the people kind of on these giant girders up in the sky, right, and endless hammering as the shell is slowly built and as the sort of the sky gradually gets taken away. It's really great, really
Right. And
horribly great.
as if it weren't hard enough to sleep as your nights become 8 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours as the day gets shorter and
Mm.
shorter. Now there's also all this noise of hammering in the sky.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of end of the world novels out there at the moment as we're grappling with the situation we're in terms of our climate. But your vision of the future, it's not like we're in the middle of the absolute apocalypse, right? Things are just slowly getting worse and worse, but people are kind of towards the end still surviving. How do you see your book as fitting in with apocalyptic fiction?
Exactly. So I really think of it as being a pre-apocalyptic book as opposed to what is much more common as post-apocalyptic books,
Hmm.
or at least books that are full of catastrophe from the start and action heroes trying to save the world.
Hmm.
I'm interested in this feeling that I think a lot of people around me have, which is that the world is going to end. In the United States, 40% of adults believe that we are living in the end times. And that has impacts on how we live our lives, everything we choose to do with our lives. I don't really believe nearly as strongly that we're living in the end times, but the constant existential threat, that is real, whether it's going to be borne out or not. And so throughout the book, different characters have different ways of reacting to living life to the soundtrack of alarm bells. Some of them decide that makes it all the more important that they live a moral life and try to repair the world. But plenty of them decide that, if the world is going to the dogs, I should just extract everything I can as quickly as I can while I still can. And these different ways of reacting to a sense of crisis ultimately fuel the crisis throughout a lot of the book.
Yeah, and I guess to a smaller extent for us, because things aren't quite as bad for us today as they are in your book. We're reacting in the same way, right? Some of us are ignoring it. Some of us are trying to do what we can. We're all working out different ways to react to the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Winnie and Tanner are interesting characters because they both really they want to make things better, right? They want to make the world better in how they are and in the jobs that they do, but they can't really. I was interested in how you explored that, these kind of ordinary, mostly good people caught up in a situation they'd like to change, but they can't. Maybe that's most of us, really.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that it is so many of us is really striking. And when I started writing the book, I was working in economic consulting. And so I didn't really feel that my job was solving many of the world's problems. And it was my first job out of college, and I just needed a job. And I think that's an incredibly common experience among people. At least people of my generation feel that way, but I don't even think it's limited to my generation. If there was anything that was a little bit unusual about my experience is that I was studying economics. And so I was studying the very systems in which I felt I was caught up, such as labor markets. And I came to see that this problem of, I desperately needed a job. The world desperately needed people to do good work. But yet I'm doing this other kind of work that it's not really solving the world's problems. That is a labor market crisis, as I see it. It's a crisis in our ability to allocate labor toward the world's problems. And so the characters in the book have kind of varying levels of awareness of that sort of system. But they all recognize that there's something wrong with the fact that there's so many people, including them, who want to do something good for the world. They know what that would be. They can't find a feasible way of constructing a life in which they can do that. I hope that because the book is, something of a systems novel where you have many different characters who don't all exactly know one another, but they all impact one another in direct or indirect ways, that the reader gains some sort of awareness of how these characters are caught up in a system that is different from and sort of contrasts with each of the characters' different levels of awareness.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And one thing that I did really like about the book is the balance in it between these big ideas and world-shaping events that are playing out and small human lives, which I think sometimes big science fiction falls away from the normal people caught in the middle of it and talks about the big ideas, which are difficult to strike that balance. Is that something that you worked hard with?
The reason that all of this matters, these systemic issues, these market dysfunctions that are in the book, is because it affects these characters' lives. And you really need to get into the psychology of these characters. What do they care about? What do they love? What makes their lives worth living? To understand how can these problems persist, continue to affect them, and in some ways entrap them into perpetuating the very problems that are that are, having these corrosive effects on their lives. That is all a complex sort of psychological process, which I was spending my life trying to understand anyway, just to understand what was happening in my own life. So from there, it was very productive for me to construct these characters in the book and really get to know them.
Yeah. Were you writing the novel then while you were working in your economics job? But how did you fit all of that together?
Well, I'm a
Well,
workaholic, which is like many of the characters in the book.
Yeah.
The tricky thing is directing your workaholism at something that will mean something to people.
So you were fitting the writing around the day job then?
Yes, yes. Which is maybe why I felt particularly acutely like my days weren't long enough.
Yeah, it all feeds together, doesn't it? Things are pretty cataclysmic by the end of the book. I haven't been able to stop thinking about kind of the ending with the shell slowly tearing apart as gravity is slowly failing. Was it difficult to know when to stop letting it play out and not kind of get to the inevitable conclusion, I guess?
So we're gonna spoil the ending here.
Yeah. Okay, spoiler warning.
I really didn't want to end the book by either definitively affirming or negating the characters' beliefs about whether the world was going to end. Because to me, it's not a book that is primarily about the world ending. It's a book about feeling like the world is ending. And what the characters, what Tanner, who's the narrator, decides at the end of the book is that maybe the world is going to end, maybe it's not, but he has come to the more important realization, which is that in all this time when I was worrying about the world ending, something was happening, and that is that the world was getting worse, and in some ways better and in some ways worse, but the world was changing. And that change has, Tanner feels that change has determined the course of my life. And I feel like that's an important realization to come to, that even if climate change, for example, does not make humans extinct, it can make the world a worse place and really affect our lives. And on the other hand, things that we do in our lives can make the world a better place. So this realization that the world can change, which is something that I think is very difficult for us to wrap our heads around, that is the epiphany, sort of. We've been coming to it for a long time by the end of the book. And that was how I realized that's the note that the book should end on.
Not all out disaster.
Right.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, Alex, I really, really liked the book. I'm really keen to know what you're planning to do next. Are you a sci-fi writer through and through, or are you going in different directions next? What's the plan?
I don't think I will always write sci-fi. I think I'm inevitably a sort of political writer. I've been working on my next book, and it feels like I'm doing something very different from circular motion, though something that I've told my students when I was a graduate student. I taught undergrads, and they would say, I don't know what kind of book I want to write. And I would tell them, if you sing, I'm a kind of casual singer. And when you sing, you'll sometimes feel like you're singing in such different styles, different songs. I'll sing a David Bowie song and feel like I sound exactly like David Bowie. And I'll sing a Bob Dylan song and think I'm doing a perfect impression of Bob Dylan. Then I listen back to the recordings and they all sound the same. They all just sound like yourself. And I have this faith that even though when I'm writing my next book, it might feel like it's in a different register, in the end, you just sound like yourself. So there'll be consistency enough.
Oh, well, I will look forward to reading it, whatever it is. Can I finish by asking if you have any great science fiction recommendations for our members? Any favorite books of your own that you'd send people, favorite books that you've read that you would recommend to others?
Yeah. So in terms of science fiction, I grew up on Isaac Asimov Foundation, and I actually just recently reread it and thought it was, I was afraid I wouldn't like it as much as when you read a book when you're 11. I liked it at least as much. And I also studied literary fiction, satire. I'm a huge fan of Catch-22, which was a big inspiration for this book.
Really interesting. In what way? How do you what kind of led you from Catch-22 to circular motion?
So Catch-22 is ostensibly a book about soldiers at war, but really it's a book about people who are in any system that has lost the faith of all the people participating, and yet the system continues to perpetuate itself and everyone continues to play their part in it, and what it feels like to be caught in that sort of system and what it does to your worldview.
Ah, interesting. I'm going to have to go and reread it. It's been years since I read that.
And it's a
Excellent. Well,
hilarious book.
excellent. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on to chat to us, Alex, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you, Alison.